Hi everyone. My name is Artyom, and today I want to tell you about a Japanese tabletop role-playing game by the name of Beast Bind Trinity.
Beast Bind Trinity.
And looking at its cover you probably might think it's some kind of erotic bondage game, but in fact it's about half-demons. Supernatural creatures who live in hiding among humans. But if you wish it's also about bondage, no one will object. Anyway, let's talk about the setting of the game. It's like a Japanese world of darkness. As references to better understand the atmosphere of this game, book suggests to check out Durarara, Magical Index, Bakemonogatari, Saint Onizen, Guyver, and these 3 manga, which I have not read. Maybe someone knows them. That's a very diverse list, of course. But I think the idea is clear. It's about supernatural creatures that live in human society. By the way, another reference which is not here, but which is I think strongly called for, is another RPG and from the same company, from Far East Amusement Research. The game that is called Double Cross. Double Cross and Beast Bind are similar both thematically and mechanically, but Double Cross is about scientific-ish mutants with superpowers. And Beast Bind is more in the realm of modern fantasy and mythology. At the beginning of the book we have this comic, that is very different in style from the cover. But let's talk about the setting where we have these half-demons in the main role. They draw energy from their powerful ego and thanks to that are able to run faster than a car, withstand a hit from a grenade launcher, break open iron doors with their bare hands and everything in that vein. But of course they are not some superheroes who do it openly, because although they are called half-demons, in fact most of them are just ordinary supernatural demons, and what makes them half is that they try to live among people and as people. And so in the eyes of the normal demons they look at best as freaks, and at worst as a traitor. And for humans they are just ordinary monsters. So not many demons are trying to display their true nature, even to their closest people. And of course they try to hide from all kinds of inquisitors from the church, government agencies, which are ready to turn over half the city if they find out that demons exist here. Even despite the fact that the half-demon may do nothing bad, and they do not want to, just want to protect their peaceful human life. Overall, this is a classic. At home among strangers, a stranger among his own, so to say. But the main thing that distinguishes demons from humans is their high-powered, strong ego. The ego here refers to the part of the person that is trying to achieve something in this world. This can be either drink the blood of young maidens, or the desire to give happiness to everyone and let no one leave offended. But unlike humans, demons have egos so strong that they are able to distort the world and change it according to their will. But if they indulge their ego and act only according to their desires, then they will suffer a kind of demise. They will cease to be sentient beings and will simply act on their instincts, trying again and again to fulfill their desires. This will happen because they came too close to the abyss, to the power that fills their egos with energy. And in order not to slip into the abyss, half-demons need connections with people, ties that become chains binding the half-demon. But in order to protect their bonds, they may have to let their egos run wild, and break those chains, and lose what they've been fighting for. Such is the uneasy fate of half-demons. Without the ego they have no self, and without the bonds they have no humanity. And they are chained to 2 sides of the world, forced to live between them. And the game is called the Beast Bind, in honor of these chains, the bonds that bind the demon beast. And Trinity is the 3rd edition. But of course not all supernatural creatures in this world try to live next to humans, and some even live in a completely different world. Some demons that indulge their ego are able to sort of let it out from within and create their own world. Such demons and half-demons are called dominators and their world is called a dominion. Dominions vary greatly in size and can be as large as a room, as large as our planet, or be huge essentially parallel universes. Examples of the most powerful and famous domains are the heavenly realm, as well as hell, and the magical land of the elves. But in fact, We all live in such a dominion without knowing it, because the earth is also someone's dominion, but nobody knows whose. A lot of demons from other dominions try to get to earth, because something draws them here, some force. That's why there's never a dull moment on earth, there's always some demon who needs something. But the most popular place for demons is in Japan, Tokyo, the Ikebukuro area. Ikebukuro is a real neighborhood in Tokyo. It's a famous place like Akihabara where you can find all kinds of anime cafes and stores and cosplayers and stuff like that. And there's a lot of foreigners there too. Well, in this game, the role of foreigners will be played by half-demons, who also flock there. The reason is that some time ago, something called emptiness tried to attack the earth and do something bad to it. Although the earth does not have its dominator, it has a protector, and this protector fought with emptiness and supposedly protected the earth. But in this battle she lost her wings, and the magical feathers from her wings were scattered all over the world. And most of the feathers ended up in Ikebukuro. And so whoever is lucky enough to get the black feather of sin from her wing will be able to realize any desire of their ego. And the white feather of love from her wing can bring salvation. The demons flock to Ikebukuro from all over the world and from other dominions to collect these feathers. Some want to get them to fulfill their desires, some want the first ones not to get them, and some want to collect them all and give them back to the protector. In short, feathers is a kind of MacGuffin, around which all sorts of plots will revolve. Naturally, a bunch of different organizations, from demons and angels, to a special unit of the Japanese police, CIA, vampire masquerade, cultists, anarchists, whatever you want, interfere in the affairs of the city. But let's see how to create characters in this game, and who can we play. Let me just say that I'm not going to talk about it too much, because the creation of the characters in this game is almost identical to the creation of the character in Double Cross RPG, which is available in English. Naturally, when creating a character we can simply choose a pre-gen and then fill in a personal backstory for it. Here are some nice illustrations of pre-gen from the book. The Oni Cop or the Ghost Racer like from Durarara. But naturally we will see how the character is created in a more detailed method, where you have to choose everything for yourself. The first thing we need to determine is the blood of our character. Blood is like a race of the character in the dandy, or something like this. In general, each blood has 3 so-called roots. It's like a variation of this blood. And the first kind of half-demons we have is actually not a demon, but a person who surpassed his humanity and became a demon. They include all kinds of holders of magical weapons, people with superpowers, and those who can summon spirits to their defense, like in JoJo Bizarre Adventure. The next blood is vampires. There are kind of regular vampires, dumpers, and a vampire who belongs to the vampire organization, Dracula. The third blood is quite unexpected. Remember in the references there was Guyver, the bio-boosted armor. It's an old anime about a dude in alien armor suit who was smashing everybody's heads in. Third blood is called Entrance, and it's all kinds of aliens from outer space. Though space is kind of a dominion here too, I guess. They're divided into parasites who are looking for information, like in the anime Parasite. Then there's the dudes from the Guyver who are looking for a strong human to become their armor. And the third variant is the kind of real aliens who came to Earth to punish the bad aliens who came to Earth. The next blood is spirits. It's all sorts of fairies, ghosts, and succubi. Then there's celestials, which includes angels, gods, and dragons. Then demons. We got all kinds of demons from hell, demons that obey the demon king, and evil gods. The next blood is called neighbors. They're these kind of supernatural creatures that have always lived somewhere near humans. They're werewolves. Oni, they're like Japanese horned demons. And the third root is children of Basted, the cat girls. Then we have the blood of human wizards, all sorts of wizards here. After them, the blood that is called Full Metal, these are humanoid robots, cyborgs, and all sorts of man-made monsters. In short, this blood is for those who want to be a mecha maid. And the last blood is called Legends. This includes characters from fairy tales, some heroic heroes from the past like in Fate's Stay Night, and urban legends that came to life like Hanako-san from the second floor women's bathroom in there. So there's a lot of blood choices. 10 main ones, and each one is divided into 3 more. From all this variety we need to choose not 1 blood, but 2. However, we can of course choose the same blood twice, and be a boring vampire. Or you can be like a ghost and an alien, or a demon plus mechanical robot maid. Much better. The next thing we have to do is to choose our style. This is how our character will fight in battle. A total of 3 styles are attacker, defender and support. And so we have 3 classes. 2 bloods and 1 style. This system with 3 character classes is very similar to all other games from F.E.A.R. Depending on the chosen classes, we now need to count our stats. This is the body, skill, feeling, blessing. It's kinda like luck and society. And there are 3 lines here. That's because this is the base value, the bonus, and the value with armor. Then we determine the character's combat characteristics: close combat, long-range combat, evasion, and movement. We also need to define flesh points. This is basically just our life points, which are taken away when we take damage. And we also need to determine humanity. This is a resource that we spend to use all sorts of special abilities. And that the less it becomes, the closer the character gets to turning into a real demon. We basically just transcribe all these stats from the table depending on the chosen classes, and may add a couple of points there. The next step is choosing abilities, which here are called arts. As you can see, there are quite a lot of them on the character sheet. There are plenty to choose from. We have blood abilities, plus there are root abilities to this blood, plus abilities from the second blood, and more abilities from our style. Some of them we get automatically, and for others we can spend 5 points. That is, just choose 5 abilities. Or increase the level to 2 or 3. In addition to what we chose, all the demons start with the ability to create arena. It's a kind of small domain ion, in which you can fight without people noticing. And also the ability to demonization, when they go, "Oh, now I'm a demon and not a human, look at me!" And then some stats change. In general, the abilities themselves here are quite typical for the games from F.E.A.R. Most of them are related to combat, and they give +1 dice somewhere, +2 dice someplace, well, and some are related to the non-combat tests. Many abilities are interesting enough in description, but the mechanical effect is usually quite simple and boring. For example, the demons have a skill for summoning an infernal butler, who will walk around with you during a scene, and help you do things, but mechanically it just counts as a kind of item that you equip during a scene, and it adds a bonus to attack, to defense, and to society checks. Like, on the one hand it is rather cool skill in the flavor, but on the other hand, mechanically it is rather boring, and there are no directly narrative effects on the situation. But of course, you can always argue that this is such a style of game, where the mechanics are the main thing, and all the story, that will arise from the skills, should fall on the shoulders of game masters and players. So whether you like this system of abilities is mostly up to you. Firstly, in terms of whether you are at all interested in skills that focus on their mechanical effects, as opposed to the moves from Powered by the Apocalypse games, where the focus is more on the narrative. And secondly, will you be able to play around with using these skills in an interesting way? But in any case, we can at least say that the choice of abilities here is large. Almost 24 for each class. The next second to last step is getting items. Here we simply have 30 points to spend to buy ourselves some stuff, weapons, armor. As in many other games from F.E.A.R, they are reserved for you, and even if we lose them in the session, the next time around they will be with you again. And the stuff that we find during the session and do not reserve, we will lose them by the next session. And the last step is the definition of personal background information. Here, we of course choose the name, appearance, and all that. And you also need to roll on the tables of the character's backstory. There's 2 tables. One for humans and one for demons. In addition to the backstory itself, it also gives us some kind of NPC that we have a connection with. Then we need to roll on the table of important encounters. Here we learn about some important moment of life that happened to the character, and can choose one of the NPCs who was involved in this event. There is, as in many games from F.E.A.R, a large gallery of NPCs in the book, which can always be pulled into the game. So maybe we'll have some connection with the dragon Loli who wants to burn the whole world and who is 700 years old, obviously, officer. Or some kind of crazy church assassin inquisitor. Or just some ordinary student who is a normal person. After that we need to choose the initial ego of the character. That is, their initial desire. For that we can also roll on the table, and it can be something like, I want to drink blood, I want to extend my life, I want to protect my daily life, or you can make up your own. After that you need to determine the transformation of the character. This is how they transform when they become more demonized. Whether it's glowing or the horns growing and so on. And the last one is the cover. That's how normal people see the character. Whether he's a schoolteacher or a policeman. We write it all down on the character sheet, and that pretty much completes the creation of the character. Now let me tell you a few words about the structure of the game. The structure here is the same as in almost all other F.E.A.R games. The session is divided into 4 parts. The first part is the introduction, where we introduce our characters, and GM sets scenes that introduce them to the events taking place in the scenario. Then comes the main phase of the game where we'll spend most of our time. Here we set scenes, develop the scenario, learn something, maybe fight someone, talk to someone, and eventually the story brings us to the climax phase, where we usually have a fight with a big boss. After the victory comes the final phase where we tell the ending of the story, and players can set a scene about what happened next to their characters. The scenes that we set during the game highlight one important moment, and once we've resolved it the game moves on to the next important moment, skipping all the unnecessary filler between those core elements. Like many other games from F.E.A.R, it is not implied here that the characters will necessarily work together or be good friends and work on the same team. But they are not strangers to each other either. All of the characters have a connection to other player characters, called the bond. But that doesn't mean that they always appear in a scene as one group. Often there are scenes for a single character or a couple of characters, while the others are doing something else. For example, they can rest to restore health points, or buy something, or get some information behind the scene. That is basically the same system as in the most other games from F.E.A.R. To achieve something in the scene usually you will have to perform a check. This is done very simply. Take 2d6, roll, add the values of the appropriate characteristic, and we need to roll a result that will be higher than the difficulty set by the GM. On 2 6s we always have a critical success, and it adds us plus 20 to the result of the roll. And on 2 1s it's always a critical failure. Additionally, some of our skills can modify the roll, allow us to roll an extra dice or add to the result. If the check involves confrontation against some other character, then we do a versus check. This is done in the same way as a normal check. Both sides simply roll a check and whoever gets more wins. In the case of a draw, the reacting character wins. The combat here is exactly the same as in most of the other F.E.A.R games. It is divided into several so-called processes, during each of which we can use suitable skills. First the preparation process, then the initiative process. We don't roll the initiative, but just look at the initiative value on the character sheet. If someone has an ability, he can use them to increase their initiative, for example. Then comes the main process where we perform actions. These are minor actions, usually movement, or some kind of buffs. And the major action, typically an attack. The attacker rolls a characteristic that is specified in the skill that is used for the attack, and the defender must decide whether he will try to dodge the attack to avoid the damage completely, or he will defend and thus increase his armor, which absorbs damage. Here again the defender can use his skills. In case of a successful attack, a damage roll is made, and the character receiving damage has his FP, flesh points, reduced. The ratio of damage to flesh points here is about enough for a couple of successful hits. If the character runs out of FP, then the so-called not real death occurs. He sort of died, but he's a demon, so he'll get up again soon. To really kill a character you have to do it in battle as a separate action, knocking him out beforehand. Combat takes place, in general, in the theater of the mind, with imaginary combat zones. If you want, you can of course mark it on a map with circles and character tokens, but it's not necessary. Another element of the combat is bad statuses, which can be given to the enemy by use of certain skills. For example, they can paralyze or confuse them. Bad statuses either prevent the recipient from doing some actions or reduce some characteristics. To remove them, generally speaking, you need to spend one of your actions. For example, you are paralyzed. To get rid of it, you need to spend your minor action. But if you spend a minor action to remove the paralysis, you can't spend it on things like moving around during that round. And some bad statuses are automatically removed at the end of the round. All in all, this is a very standard F.E.A.R combat system, which can be seen in Altered and Double Cross and in many games. This system is not bad and not good, that's just a generic RPG combat. So far the game mechanics, as you can see, everything is pretty ordinary, but Beast Bind Trinity is one of those games that has a unique thing that makes the whole game. And here it is called the system of bonds and ego. Remember, I already said that the ego here is the character's desire, and the bond is what connects the characters to the human world, allowing them to remain human, well, half human. Remember, when we created a character, we chose their ego, and also during the creation, or rather a little later, when we start the game, we have to choose a character's bonds. Or rather create them with other player characters and with NPC important to the scenario. A bond is not just some abstract connection, it has content, that is, the type of who they are, friends, lovers, rivals, something else. But our bonds are not limited to what we get at the beginning of the game. In other words, if you have established some kind of emotional bond with some other character at the session, you simply tell the GM that I think we now have a bond with him, with so-and-so feelings. And for every bond that you have on the character sheet, you get a point of love. Love is a meta resource that can be used for some actions. For example, using love you can get the so-called liberation state, through which the character regains some of his flesh points, and can even resurrect himself if he temporarily died, and gets an extra dice for all checks. I.e., he now rolls 3 dice and chooses the 2 biggest ones. Moreover, love can also be spent to use some cool skills, which require love as a price for use. That is, you see, yes, by having a relationship with someone in the game we get metacurrency for which you can get in-game bonuses. The second part of this system is the ego. If the player believes his character has expressed his ego during a scene, he gets a point of sin. Sin is another metacurrency, with which we buy ourselves all sorts of bonuses. We can increase damage, increase the result of a roll, even resurrect from true death. Make it so that the opponent cannot dodge our attack. In short, there is more use than for love. However, you can spend your love to give your sin effect to another character. But you probably noticed that we have many bonds, but only one ego, one desire. But this is only before the game starts. If during the sessions the character's relationship with the source of his bond somehow dramatically changes and that bond loses its power, then a new ego will arise in its place. And the desire that arises will usually reflect the content of the bond that disappeared. And if we want to set the ego aside again and regain the lost bond, then we can spend a love point on that. You might ask, why you would do that? Because having a lot of ego is good, since we can roleplay it more often, get sin more often, use all kinds of bonuses more often, and if we put it back, turning ego into a bond, it's almost like we won't gain anything in return. It's kind of like that, but not really, because there's a third part of this system that comes into play, called humanity. This is an indicator that shows in numerical terms how close our half-demon is to a human being, not any particular one, but in the sense of humanity. The player will have to mark it on his character's record sheet, on a scale like this. Humanity starts with about 60 points, and during the session it will decrease. The humanity of the character decreases every time he appears in a scene by 1d6. Remember, I said that in this game the whole group usually doesn't appear in a scene. This decrease in humanity is a big reason why this happens. If you want to appear in a scene, it should be worth it to you. And also, this decrease in humanity serves as a sort of countdown clock to the end of the game. So we don't have too many scenes. Humanity also decreases when the character uses his skills. Each skill has a cost in humanity you have to pay for using it. In other words, the more demonic powers our half-demon uses, the less human he becomes. And besides, if you take some crazy powerful combination of skills, you can of course beat everyone with it, but you have to pay for it in humanity. And also, humanity decreases when the character during the game encounters something that exposes his ego. It's usually either a powerful plot point or an encounter with a mighty demon dominator who controls his dominion. But the more we start to look like a demon, the more our demonic powers give us odds of success. In the mechanics of the game, this is expressed by the fact that our critical value drops first from 12 to 11 and then to 10 and then to 9. The critical value is the value at which the dice roll a crit. Another effect is egoization of bonds. At the values of 40, 20 and 0, character loses one of his bonds, and it turns into an ego. If the humanity of the character reaches 0, and remains that way until the end of the game, he will stop being a half-demon and either turn into a real demon or lose his mind altogether, and will simply obey his ego instincts, becoming a monster. In any case, he will stop being a player's character, and will become an NPC. And losing a character in this way is actually more likely than death in battle. Because you can always come back from death by spending either sin or love. But the loss of humanity is a really serious problem. But even if we have lost all humanity, it is not the end, because we still have bonds that bind us to the human world. After completing the session for each active bond, we restore 1 to 6 humanity, and if our humanity rises above 0, congratulations, we are still human. And that is why we must use love to turn the obtained ego back into bonds. But even more humanity can be restored if during the session we followed the guidelines given to us in the scenario by the GM. That is, if we played our assigned role to help in the development of the scenario, rather than running it. Such guidelines are called spiritual anchor, and if we follow this spiritual anchor, then we restore not 1 to 6 for each bond, but 2d6. As you can understand, the loss of humanity is quite a dangerous process, and you might think, well, this game should be played carefully, so as not to lose a lot of humanity. But this is not quite true, because the game encourages us to play risky with how it distributes the experience points. First, experience points here are awarded for the usual stuff like: you played well, you helped the group together, you found a place to play, you brought food, you helped develop the session, you helped other characters, and so on. If you did all these things, you get 1 experience point for each, 5 points in total, plus you get experience points for enemy strength, 3 to 5 points. In addition, you also get experience points for the value of humanity you end the game with. If you end the game with a value from 1 to 20, meaning in the last game chapter your value will be less than 0, and you restore it to 1 and 20 afterwards, then you get the whole 5 experience points. That is, the lion's share of experience you get for dropping your humanity to a dangerous level, below 0. If your humanity ends up being a bit higher, you get a bit less experience points, 3 or 4. And if your humanity is less than 0 and you turn into an NPC, you also get 2 experience points. Experience points here are given to players, not characters, so you can just spend that experience on your new character. But if you don't want to lose a character, but you still can't get more than 0 humanity at the end, you can forego getting experience points altogether. And roll 2 extra dice for each bond to restore humanity. So that's a very interesting system of ego, bonds and humanity, which forces us to make new bonds with characters during the session, and then dramatically change them. Ruin them in order to turn them into our power, which we can draw on by role-playing our ego. And so you can understand that it might seem to be a kind of a game about skill checks and about fighting, but in fact, it's about role-playing, because without it, the checks will be hard to make. And the battles are hard to win. So, let me go back for a second and try again to somehow evaluate all of the game's elements from the vantage point of my own tastes. Modern urban fantasy is generally okay with me. You really could make a game similar to Durarara or Tsukiheim using this system, and it would be basically fine. Not bad. The only thing I would do is to limit the general level of complexity of this setting, because here by default we have all types of ghosts, and vampires, and aliens, and heroic spirits. If this all is mixed in one game, then it will turn out to be quite a feature creep. So it might be necessary to limit the options in advance. For example, the game should be done without the alien. Or whatever blood the players took for themselves, those entities will exist in the world. Well, at least they will be in the foreground. If we have a demon, an angel and a human mage, let's not shove vampires in here, it's too much already. And I probably would have ignored the plot about feathers of the Defender of the Earth, which appeared in Tokyo. Even without it, there is in fact a lot to tie the plot around. In general, the setting is fine, if you set it within certain limits, and set the right focus. Character creation is as usual with games from F.E.A.R. There is a lot to choose from, there is room to let your autism run wild, but there remains my eternal complaint about the skills, that they are very mechanical, and for the narrative effect, yes. Please come up with it yourself. About the structure of the session and the basic mechanics, well, what can I say? I'm not a super big fan of F.E.A.R games in terms of basic mechanics. And the way they want us to play the session by their scenarios. Or write our own scripts. So everything here is somehow mechanically boring and lacks tools for improvisation, for staging scenes. But the superstructure in the form of ego and bond system certainly saves the game and distinguishes it from the generic mass of gray garbage. The only criticism of this system is that it is 95% copied from Double Cross, and in fact Beast Bind Trinity is just Double Cross in the modern fantasy setting. Well, that's basically fine, I would still play it, but of course the system loses points for the copying its homework. Now about the content for the game. Besides the main rule book where these are all the classes and world descriptions and a couple of scenarios, there are 3 additional books for the game. There you can find even more powers, skills, classes, scenarios, world descriptions, tables, sexy covers, and so on. In general, game has a lot of content, almost 800 pages. To make a long story short, what would I say about Beast Bind Trinity? Overall, well, not a bad game. I would play it. I would GM it. Should you be sad that it is not available in English? Well, I would not be. Overall, I give it 3 mecha vampire maids out of 5. Phew. And we are done. By the way, I have a bunch more reviews for Japanese RPGs, for which there is no English translation. For example, Ayabito, a game about Japanese police and yokai who work together to fight against evil spirits in Taisho-era Japan. Or Deadline Heroes RPG, which is basically a Japanese take on Marvel's superheroes. But all those reviews are in Russian language. If you'd like to see any of them in English, you can check the whole list of video on my main channel, link in the description, and leave a comment here. By the way, sorry about Robot fucking up some sentences. It's better than listening to my accent for half an hour anyway. Thank you for watching and see you some other time.